Welcome to Next In. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Reid Cuming, who is the co-founder and COO of Superstate. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Shane.
Absolutely, man. So where are you coming from today?
Oh, in life, everywhere. Calling in from San Francisco, California, to be a bit more specific on the globe.
Fantastic. What is it like in San Francisco today? I feel like everybody has their own opinions, but I'm curious,
Yes.
what is it like today?
The headlines don't need to be fully believed. It is a beautiful day, or it was a beautiful day today. The fog has come in, but for the most part, it's nice. It's very pleasant here. It's not very humid. It's not very hot. It's a great spot.
I've got all the humidity and hotness out here in Nashville. It's not just our chicken right now, but I think the last week has been like 100 degrees and it's been wild. Like this weekend I had like 100 degrees. I hated it when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. So growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I felt like a vampire. And when I first moved out here, like the sunshine, like had me like squinting all the time. I was like, no. And then now I'm like, I was out like a freaking flower where I was just like, give me it all. Like, I don't even understand it. I didn't even recognize myself last weekend. It was embarrassing. I was like sitting in Starbucks and I was like outside, just like floating. And some of my coworkers saw me just like sitting there, like basking in the parking lot of Starbucks, waiting to get my nitro brew. And they were all making like one of my guys took a video of me because I was just out there like a flower, like a teacup, like this, and took a video of it, and it was awesome.
Sometimes you just need a change, or even a memory to get back into shape. Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that from time to time, going back into things that you knew.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, so Reid, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. And today, our goal on this every single time is to understand how people got to where they have. So you have a really interesting story. You've obviously been very successful, and all the way to co-founding Superstate and being the COO. And a lot of people prior to knowing your story might be like, oh, there was probably some really easy thing that he did to get there, because clearly becoming a co-founder and a COO is easy. Every entrepreneur wants to hear that. But it's not. Like, you went through battles. Like there was things that you had to learn along the way. But before we get into the battle scars and what you learned and how you grew into the leader that you are today, I really would want to just go like, how did you get started? Like, how did you even one day you woke up and you were like, I want to do something. So help me understand kind of your origin story.
Great question. I think personally, I've always kind of wanted, variety, or I get a little bit tired of a particular theme or environment or type of work. And so therefore seek out another challenge or another opportunity or just a different setting. And so I've kind of done that throughout my professional career and life, where I moved to different cities, did things that I did not have any clue about how they worked, but thought I could figure it out. And I've just kind of done that repeatedly, definitely with not, a smooth linear trajectory up and to the right, but at the very least along the way, picking up good skills, a great a group of friends and colleagues, and always learning something to try to get a little bit better and make it worthwhile.
So in college, so I was like doing some research on you, right? So when I think about where you were, it was like you were at UPenn, and then while you were at UPenn, or back in 2011, after UPenn, you decided to start your own company. Really early on in your career, platform development, led a small team of 3 people in development for a social debate platform. What inspired that? Like, I would like to know, like, from college, I mean, at that point, you're like 24, 25, I'm assuming. I don't know.
Roughly.
And you're like, I'm going to take a leap of faith. Like, I don't know a lot of 25-year-olds that are going out there being like, I'm going to start my own thing and figure it out. But you did. So what got to there?
It was a little bit of what I was saying before. I've been a consultant working in data analytics and restructuring for several years, and really wanted to work on something else. And if anything, I wanted to work on something that was my own. And it was actually working with a family member of mine, a cousin, who was technical on what would be a fun project or idea. And he, kind of thought of at that point in time, social media was very different from what it is today. We didn't have TikTok. I think we had Instagram, we had Twitter, we had Facebook, and they were still not. And we had like YouTube and YouTube comments, but there wasn't like fulsome debates. It was just a lot of dunking and a lot of like random thoughts. And so there's a thought of maybe there's an opportunity here to create a forum for more robust debate in some way, longer form perhaps, versus like the 280 characters for a tweet. Um, and so we started to go down the path of, what would that look like? How would we build it? And it was a fun project. We were both kind of part timing it though, and I think this happens kind of most in many cases with first time founders or entrepreneurs is that, especially in software, if you don't fully commit, it kind of dies on the vine or doesn't really get off the
Like
ground.
I
And
gotta
that's
dip my toes in the pond and we're just gonna wade in the water a little bit, but I'm not getting ready to dive in at all.
precisely. And without that sort of commitment and really zeal behind it to make it your full time, 100% everything, it's probably not going to go anywhere unless you're just extremely fortunate where product market fit for a half baked, haphazardly put together thing is just immediately hit, and you're just like, okay, I guess I'll do it. But for us, it was not the case. But it was still, nevertheless, a lot of fun to go about. Setting up the business, starting to build out some of the interfaces, and then test a very early pilot with a few people, but didn't really materialize anything significant, I would say.
Got it. But I don't want to overlook the fact that like just getting started, and I think a lot of people overlook that, is just getting started and just getting a taste and even dipping your toes in the pond. Like that's a pretty big step. And I think a lot of people overlook how big of a step it is, where even if it's part-time, that part-time investment, I have to imagine still cooked you up late at night, still made you lose sleep. I mean, there was things there that like
Oh, you're
people
you're
overlook.
completely you're absolutely right. The I think the big takeaway from a lot of experiences thus far, is particularly in being an entrepreneur working for smaller companies, is that it's not the first idea; it's the second, third, fifth idea that really matters, because there you'll iterate on it, you'll learn something, there'll be a powerful feature or concept that emerges, and is simply by the nature of like doing the work of going to the office or whatever and working with the people on this problem that will begin to emerge. And that's where the real power of jumping in, taking a risk, starting it off is really really fantastic. So it doesn't need to be perfect. I think is kind of the big thing. You just need to start trying and doing the work, and keep pushing forward one foot at a time and surviving. And in many cases, you do end up striking upon something that's meaningful, that you like, and that the market likes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: there are businesses that I started that I am not confident that I'm ever going to put on LinkedIn because it was such a massive failure that I was just like,
Yeah.
we're just going to pretend that never even existed. We're going to obliterate that thing. We're gonna shove that down somewhere where therapy is going to deal with it, and then we'll move on and we'll keep going forward with the stuff that makes sense and fuels some positivity in life. Right? We'll
Yes.
take that behind the barn and shoot it. Move on to the next.
Unfortunately, in this day and age, there's always a trail. Something it'll be unearthed at some point.
Right. So obviously, like throughout your career, eventually you went from, starting a company. You started a few. You co-founded, Sales Bench, and then eventually you made it to Square. You made it to Stripe, and head of product at Chime. What were some of the major differences where you were working at some of these smaller companies that you co-founded, and then eventually you ended up joining Square, Stripe, Chime, and how did that influence your career before coming and starting Superstate?
Yeah. It's been about 5 years consulting, during which time I did attempt to build this kind of side hustle thing that really didn't go anywhere. And then I got a little bit tired of the consulting work, the lifestyle, kind of always traveling, and never really being able to see kind of the next iteration around the cycle of work. You're kind of brought in to do one thing, and then you move on to another project, and you don't really get to iterate and see it really evolve. So I joined a few other companies, one of which I helped build. By the end of that, though, I'd been doing that for 2.5, almost 3 years. Got a little bit just tired of the startup grind like that. It is a difficult thing to do, especially if it doesn't feel like momentum's on your side. It doesn't feel like it's really working really well. and you don't necessarily know exactly how to change that just yet. Um, and so I started to just really look around to see what companies in software in the Bay Area I admired that I might want to work for, where I could maybe learn things like that. Like how do you develop momentum? How do you develop really high quality products? How do you build and scale businesses and infrastructure? And Square was always a company that I admired. Um, for a variety of reasons. The attention to design and detail, the fact they were solving a very real problem that I had empathy for. Trying to sign up to get an account to get a credit card terminal 2 decades ago was like horrific and just absolutely awful. Um, and the culture of the company seemed really really positive. So I kind of worked my network and was able to find a few people I knew there, and was able to apply and interview and join, and it was great. I spent about 4 years there, and then kind of got tired of my time there. It kind of see there's a theme, and eventually I kind of get a little exhausted or believe that I have reached some level of diminishing returns and seek another challenge. And so I moved to Stripe. I really wanted to do that to see scale. Square was great, but I wanted to see global scale, which Stripe was really pushing into more and more. So I went and saw that. How do you make that happen? And Chime was really kind of bringing it back together. How do you do this not necessarily for enterprises or SMBs, but how do you do it for consumers on a large scale? So it's been kind of an iterative process of just what would be the next interesting challenge, or what am I missing now, or what could be an exciting project or problem to work on, and then seek that out and find it, and then go work on it.
Interesting. And so when I think about that, right, and when I think about how life and perspective changes over time, because you had these experiences. So early on, you were doing a lot of this consulting. You were dipping your toes in the pond and trying to figure out, how do I get this business started on the side, and multiple iterations as you were doing some of this professional consulting. You got tired of it, and then you dived into the world of Stripe and Chime, and you're able to see massive scale, and you were able to influence in a very positive way. And then you decided to come out of that and to attempt the startup thing again. And now you're at Superstate, where Superstate, correct me if I'm wrong, looks like it is the most successful company that you've been able to co-found, where you guys have raised over $14 million in funding, and you're on track for awesome growth, and it looks amazing. But what I want to do is kind of think about, what was that before and after? Like, what changed mentally, like from your perspective after your experience, after Square, Stripe, and Chime. There's the pre and the post. Like, help me understand how that influenced who you are as an entrepreneur today.
It's a great question. I think there's I've kind of had the slight characteristic of a bit of like an aversion to authority, to where once I'm not in some degree of control or of my own destiny, or even my day to day, I start to get a little bit frustrated by that. I think everyone is their own person and can determine how they like to work within systems, or how they like to build their own systems to work within. Eventually, I just get a little bit tired of someone else's system. I want to go build my own. And so that's a little bit of what was kind of driving some of the mental math behind it. But
Says
I think
every entrepreneur ever, right? Like I'm a horrible employee, so I guess I got to start a company.
I think I was actually a great employee until I decided that I no longer wanted to work well within the system, and then at that point I kind of realized that this is counterproductive to all parties. We should maybe find something new. Um, I do think one of the things that have kind of, you asked, like, what has changed between, super states and working in fintech. And I don't know if there's been like a drastic mental shift. There's always been a desire to solve hard problems. I've always had that, and do solve problems that are meaningful to kind of a wide swath of people. I think fintech has really done a great job of that, but they have not completely kind of delivered on the promise of being able to kind of reinvent or evolve financial infrastructure and systems for kind of everyone. I think companies like Superstate and others that work in the sort of blockchain space have more of a stronger swing, if you will, to try to make that actually manifest. So I don't know if there's really been a mental shift. It was more of, I'd like to do more. Like what more can I,
So
how much further can I drill?
more and you're like, I happened to find a product that got sticky. And part of it was like that rapid iteration of like, I got a little lucky in the sense of like, we picked something that got sticky. The other stuff I picked, it just didn't work. And so part of it was just a process of elimination, statistics, odds. And we found something that got stuck and won. And now we're going to be able to boom it.
That's exactly right. I think there's a few concepts to think about this, and it's kind of up to everyone to figure out how to think about it. There's sort of problem selection, like what problems are you going to go try out and solve? Like what are meaningful and useful? And there's kind of table selection, where you're really trying to understand: are you with the right people?
Hmm.
Are you trying to solve the right problem together? And I think I've been very fortunate in my career to where there's always been at least one, two, or more people that I've been able to work very closely with, and have become initially colleagues or even peers, or sometimes they were reporting to me or I was reporting to them, and it's really worked incredibly well. Kind of been able to kind of stay with each other over time. In fact, that's what happened with Superstate. A few of us broke away from a prior company we were at, called Compound, to go out and build this new company, as we thought this would be fantastic to do, a great opportunity. And I think that makes the hard days less hard, being able to work on things with
Interesting.
people you're close with, know how to work with well, and are friends with in many cases.
So let me ask you this then. Was it, hey, I believe that I always had a problem that was really interesting to solve, but it was the table problem that was missing. And the table is actually what's allowing me, like the people around the table is really what's allowing me to execute better. It's the people, less of the problem. Or I always thought I was solving interesting problems, but the people and the problem, there's just been better execution.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it's always binary in the sense of you have to optimize for like one or the other. I think you definitely do want to. I think it's desirable to have both these things kind of in play, but it can be a
Always.
ladder. One time you're focusing really on the problem space, another time you're focusing really on the people that you're with or the culture. Another could be, it's the actual compensation that you really care about. You need to like level up in your career in some way. So I think it depends on what you're trying to optimize for. It doesn't need to be always green, but one of those things needs to be on for you to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, it's always the day old. Is it people? Is it problem? Or is it people, product, process? I mean, at the end of the day,
Yep.
it always ends up being one of those three things, right? Which is like, what are you doing? What's the difference? Is it people, process, product? And in this case, it sounds like it could have been all of the above. And you've learned through trial and error, and you've learned through kind of your collective experience. So when I think about that, I really want to kind of come back to collective experience and understand, was there a moment ever where, yeah, I like to think about failures. I'm a big believer in like failing forward. But that's who I am. I have to like mess up and stub my toe and cry a bit, to grow. And take it from me, I do it the hard way. I shouldn't do that. I should just go read a book and then just implement it as perfectly as I possibly can. But I have
Yes.
ADHD like crazy and I don't get to do that. So was there a moment in time where you like had a learning lesson or a major failure that really, you know, created a catalyst for you to learn and to grow and to shape you, where you were able to have some battle scars, if you will, where you're like, this really impacted me in a very positive way. I have so many failure stories where I'm like, yep, that was a big mistake, but it allowed me to grow as a person. So I'm curious what you have where it's like, this was like a big mess that kind of messed me up a bit, but because of it, it refined me and it grew me and it groomed me and it allowed me to evolve who I am today.
No, great question. I think having ego checking moments and experiences are generally very valuable for everyone. It kind of ensures that you're able to absorb difficulty, or be a bit more resilient in the case of in the case of challenges. I don't think anyone likes to fail. Like, to be quite honest, like who wants to get an F? Like, no, I would haze. Uh, but it does teach you like where you are maybe weaker in, how to improve, or where you need to improve. Uh, I don't know if there's anything that particularly comes to mind, like in an exact instance, but I certainly, I think a few things fall to two buckets for me when I think of this. It's like you just hit a wall on what is what's really working for you or not working for you. You just all of a sudden you're not learning. All of a sudden you're not making any sort of forward progress. um, or you're being held back in some way. Another bucket might be you're just not flexing high agency. Like you're just not able to really. It's kind of a variant of hitting the wall. You're just not really able to become what you really think you can become. In some ways, I think these are just natural moments that kind of happen in careers or professional life, where there's always going to be someone or some group or someone else that has demands or expectations or perceptions that are maybe misaligned to your own, that make it hard to break through the wall or make it hard um, to be to to operate in the way you'd like to. Um, and I think it's important to recognize these as they can really turn them to your benefit, right? You can if you're an employee and you've kind of reached this moment, maybe it's time to be just very honest with yourself on like, does this work? Like, is it the environment? Is it the problem? Is it is it the manager? And maybe need a change. Maybe need a new skill. Maybe need a new company. Maybe need just a new location. I think I can just very clearly determine that. Yeah, I've hit a wall and it's not working for me anymore. Why is that? Okay, what would change? What could I change that would actually make that not the case? Um, I know the side like more like being able to flex agency. You know I think this is like a hard one for founders as well. Is like if you're not able to like do everything you want to do, all of a sudden you have to put your kind of ego to the side, but not necessarily to the point of like pure deference of responsibility and accountability. Um, I think it's back to the point of like kind of everything's a system. And
Mm,
what's more important here is to really think about the outcomes or goals that you're seeking. So if you're, a founder or an employer and you're creating the system, you've really hired a variety of people to be experts and you rely on them, and that's fine. Like you don't need to go around trying to understand and micromanage literally everything. You make certain that it hits a high quality bar, but you shouldn't necessarily be doing everyone's job.
yeah.
I think if you're more hired into a particular role and you're hired into a system, similarly, you need to work with everyone around you to get the job done. But it's not always within your control to manage the outcomes or manage the type of work. It You can try to help that the average correctness of decisions is kind of on target.
Yeah.
So I kind of viewed it as less about particular moments that like, wow, that failure really changed me. It's more of what happens when I feel like I've hit a wall or I'm unable to make forward progress or I'm not um, I'm not really achieving all that I believe that I can achieve in this moment in time. Like how do you evaluate that? How do you digest it? Because that in of itself can be a bit frustrating. If you started at a place, it might be great, but then all of a sudden it's not great. Like what changed? I think you
Yeah.
have to evaluate that honestly.
What I find really interesting about the way that you answer that question is it feels like I mean, let's be real, you're a COO. So I'm like looking at it and it feels like everything falls in a framework for you where it's like you have
Yeah.
these processes that you've built and you have a response to every action and you've been able to build out kind of how do you have this sequence of events on when you encounter something. You're a very systemized person. So it's like, well, I don't have any major things. And I think a lot of that is like somewhere in your career early on, you established a sense of trust with yourself where it's like, and trust in a lot of ways is patience and just having consistent formulas that you're going to follow. And so I look at it as like you have trust in yourself and you have a framework that you've built early on in your career, which has allowed you to not necessarily have these massive peaks and valleys because you have a framework that you follow throughout your entire life. That's how I feel, and that's what I interpret based off of some of the things that you said. And so part of me just wants to go like, where did you learn that from? Like, did you at one point in time have like a mentor, whether that was in school, whether it was a parent, whether that was in work, like something? How did you build out that process, that framework, and who was the mentor that helped establish that? Because there's some foundational language that you're using there that everything feels like it's wrapped up in a bow, and it's to me, I'm like, oh, how you got to become a COO is like it's in the way that you speak, in the way that you talk, in the way that you work, and I want to unravel that a bit.
Oh, I would first say I think everyone should find their own style for this sort of thing, right? And sometimes you develop your own frameworks for making decisions based upon just your own experiences or being for mentors or best practices. But I think it's kind of what works for you. Um, Maybe kind of taking a few steps back as far as things being like very even. I don't think that was always the case. there were some events that were kind of shocks to the system. They were maybe not as fully thought out, but ultimately, worked itself out over time. Dating myself a little bit, I kind of entered the job market during the great financial crisis, and that was incredibly eye-opening for someone so young. And at that point, it was really survival. You had to find a new job. Coming out of Penn, jobs were not really everywhere within finance or consulting, but I was able to find one and make it work. And I think that kind of revealed within me, you have to survive, you have to be gritty, you have to be resolute, and you have to be flexible. You may not always get what you want, but at least you got, better than zero.
Yeah.
And you're able to keep moving forward.
Well, those 3 years don't exist. So that was one of those things that we took in the back and buried. So 2008, 2011,
they're gone.
LinkedIn.
They're gone. They never happened. Fortunately, it was a little bit earlier. But the another aspect there is, I kind of alluded to this before, that I spent a lot of time in consulting. I think I started in 2009 actually, and then left in 2012 or 13. But I left consulting kind of not. It wasn't as fully thought out as maybe what I'm thinking here, or what I've kind of alluded to before. It was really very much of, I'm tired of this, and I kind of did the whole sell your possessions, pack your bags, move west, sleep on someone else's couch for a while until you kind of put the pieces together. And I was able to put the pieces together again through survive, through grit, through being resilient in the face of that, but also with some degree of naivete. I think if you go and wanting perfect execution, perfect outcomes with complete information, you may not ever take the leap. You just kind of have to go. But you asked about mentors. I'm like, okay, how did I develop all these things? I don't. There's never been like a single person or set of people that have like really, that's a mentor. I've really always had at least one or two peers that I've been close with at kind of every stage throughout the career that have really kind of helped level me up, or I've helped level them up in some ways, and also becoming friends. And it's kind of developed this concept of, we're in it together. We need to row as a team. So we need to do things together that compound. How do we do that well? And a little bit of it has been just sharing concepts, sharing ideas, and also taking risks that have kind of revealed ways to think about, was that a risk worth taking? Should I have taken more risks? How do I make decisions without kind of overburdening myself and being comfortable with, current state? So I think over time, it's really just been iterative, like picking up small things from different people over time throughout my career. There's not been like a singular person that I've really encountered that has been like, yes, that person made me and molded me into what I am today. It's been more, there's an amalgam of people that have done that.
Yeah, like I've always compared that to, like, have you ever had anybody talk about like Picasso theory?
No.
Okay, so I've always used this thing where it's like, by the way, I don't like Picasso's art. So I'll first and foremost say that, like, I think whatever. I don't like his art, but I did like his principles. And one of those principles was, great artists steal, they do not copy. So one of the things that I think that he got so famous for was like this idea that he was able to look at other artists, recognize the things that he loved, the things that he was inspired by, and he was able to take that variant of art and implement it into his own art, to where he was blending things in ways where he used the different styles to make something truly special, where it wasn't just a singular type of art, and instead it was a blend of multiple pieces of art. And so I've always really enjoyed that, where it's like, where you're coming from, Reid, is like, I really, that kind of that Picasso's theory, which is like, I'm just going to go look at all of the options that are readily available for me, and I'm going to pick and choose the things that fit my style best and will allow me to represent what I want and what I want to be able to portray to the world. And you've been able to implement the Picasso theory really well, and allowing you to kind of succeed in life.
I'm gonna steal that. That's great. I love
That's
it.
the whole point. You can steal it all you want. So I want to kind of jump into, a little bit about what you are building, Superstate. Like, what is Superstate? Help me understand, what are y'all doing?
Yeah. I'll give you the high level kind of overview. Superstate is an asset manager, as you can kind of think of those on Wall Street that create all kinds of funds, ETFs, mutual funds, other variants like that. The differentiator for us is instead of our creating these funds and then making them available at your Fidelity account or your Charles Schwab account or something like that, or Robinhood, you're able to actually purchase them directly from us. And instead of getting a share of those brokerage accounts I just mentioned, you get a token on the blockchain. Right now, the Ethereum blockchain that represents your ownership of that fund. Um, it's really meant to be a bridge between the traditional financial world and the ecosystem within the blockchain environment, really facilitating a means for Superstate, facilitating different bridges and roads to connect these to networks of activity within finance. The first product that we have is really very similar to a money market fund, although it's a private fund, but it behaves like a money market fund. So it's really just U.S. government treasury bills that are held within a fund, and shareholders of that fund have tokens on the blockchain that represent their share, and they earn interest from that fund, just as you would if you held a mutual fund holding those same assets. The desire is really to build kind of a multi-lane highway, with multi-tiers, really with different types of funds and assets going in different directions, some faster than others, some slower than others, some bigger than others, depending upon the volume, the demand, the desire, and the difficulty. But that's what
How
we're building.
how much does somebody need to know about blockchain or cryptocurrency before ever getting involved with somebody like Superstate? So, like, what is the level of knowledge and awareness do they need to have for day one?
Well, if you're a customer, not really anything. If you've ever invested in a mutual fund, it's going to be kind of a very similar type of process, generally. Um, but if you're, looking to work at Superstate, there's definitely going to be a strong need to understand financial principles, how finance works, what the ecosystem of financial world really is, and also then on the other side, the blockchain, like how does that work, and how do we weave these together, or at least create some degree of interoperability to make them work well seamlessly without there being something exposed to the client that is suboptimal.
So, one sort of question that I have, right, is like there are a lot of people in the world right now that are crypto curious. There are people that are crypto naive. There's like, all the other things that we can call it, right? Walking through even my office today, right? I heard people talk about like meme coins. They talked about the Shiba Inu, Doge coins. I mean, obviously, I have a Shiba Inu, so like that one gets brought up all the time. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. And there's all these other, cryptocurrency keywords that are getting out there. But a lot of people, they just don't even know what it really is. Like there's a lot of people that are like, okay, cool. So like I do want to think about my finances and potentially my 401k and all of these other financial institutions that are going to help me get spun up for retirement or some sort of financial strategy. And let's say that I'm crypto curious. Like what is it even like from a baseline understanding? How do I even know if I'm investing my funds into Superstate? How do I trust it? How do I know it? What is it?
No, great question. I say kind of you mentioned a variety of different cryptocurrencies and digital assets. I would say, if you're dipping your toes in for the first time, use a central exchange, use Coinbase, make it easy for yourself, so that it's a little bit safer and more. There's some more guardrails. If you don't understand, how Shiba Inu, the coin, works, or how what Solana is, maybe it's not worth putting your money there. With any type of asset class, equities, bonds, real estate, there's a variety of risks, and the best way to invest is to inform yourself about those risks, to educate yourself about those risks, rather. I think in the case of cryptocurrencies, it's a relatively novel asset class in like the history of assets, but it does not mean that it's not readily understandable. Um, you mentioned Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think that there are some safer investments out there, or at least those that have longer histories to really just understand, and that a big backlog of information to grasp why are these things useful? Why does that usefulness get reflected in the value of the token at any moment in time? Um, Now, when you take that in context and looking at Superstate, what we've done is, instead of building a crypto native asset, we've actually built just a very normal vanilla fund that you again might see on Fidelity or Charles Schwab, and we just tokenized your share of that fund, and that's really it. So in practice, it's really not a cryptocurrency; it's a security, certainly,
Okay.
but it is not a cryptocurrency in the sense of Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or Dogecoin. It's really a private money market fund type vehicle that allows you to um, uh, uh, place the asset on the blockchain versus having it just stored somewhere in a vault at Fidelity or at Charles Schwab or JP Morgan.
So like if I'm investing in the S&P 500, and that's like I know what I guess I know what that is. Like I know that it's happens to be stocks that I could potentially purchase at companies that have been stable over a series of years and whatever. I'm naive and I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, S&P 500. I was told that's a safe bet. How is that different than if I'm going to put an investment with you guys and looking at something that is on Ethereum, right? So like what is that?
Uh,
Because you mentioned a couple of times where it's like it's a little bit about risk. So would it be like, hey, like I have a mutual fund, but like I have a high risk option and I have a low risk option, and the Ethereum gives me that high risk, potentially high return option, and help me understand that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great concept. We have Ethereum on kind of one side, and maybe we have the Superstate fund on the other side. And in the middle would be really the S&P 500. Um, uh, the variance here is really kind of you know which one of these are riskier than the other, and with that, how volatile or how much upside or downside could there be? Cryptocurrencies, they trade 24/7. The markets never close for them ever. So you could go to sleep and your Ethereum is worth X, and wake up in the morning and your Ethereum is worth half that. And you're like, what happened? And then you have to go back in time and try to figure out what happened. But so it's much more volatile. But there's a lot of potential, because of that volatility, there's a lot of risks where all of a sudden it could go the other way. Your money could have doubled, but you don't really know all the time. It's very hard to tell the future. S&P 500, well, it's an index. So you get a basket of um, sometimes S&P 500 is not weighted or not weighted like the Dow, but you'll get a basket of these equities that go through a rigorous compliance and vetting process with the SEC to be listed on the exchange. And they kind of de-risk themselves by, you're not fully concentrated in one asset like you would be with Ethereum. Here, if you know let's say Nvidia goes crazy, that's fantastic, but you're not going to see the full upside of it because you're also going to be invested in a variety of other stocks that may not be as as performant. But let's say Nvidia falls dramatically, well, you're protected a little bit because these other assets kind of insulate you from the full fall because you've dispersed your investment. um, Now for the Superstate fund, because at least in the current product we have in market, is only investing in U.S. government securities, mostly Treasury bills. That is one of the biggest, broadest, deepest, safest markets there are. The U.S. government backing up its debt and generating a yield. You're basically buying a bond from the government, and they'll pay you back, pay you the principal as well as interest on that yield. It's historically considered to be an incredibly safe place to place your money.
Yeah,
So they're very different risk curves.
I always think it's funny when I think about risk, when I think about some of the differences between traditional stocks and cryptocurrencies. I always like to think about back in the day where, uh, you know, like Robinhood, right? When the GameStop stock got
Yes.
frozen for 2 weeks, it was
Yes.
like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and what that did to people, where there were so many people that were heavily invested, and then all of a sudden this thing happened, and the windows were closed to buy or sell, and people didn't know what to do with that. It's like, would that have happened had that been the same thing? Let's say it was Bitcoin or was it Ethereum. Would that have ever happened had it been on a blockchain in comparison to the traditional markets?
It's a great question, and I think this is where it is always valuable to educate yourself more and more about these things. It would depend entirely on a variety of things. Were you using a centralized exchange to purchase and buy these assets? If you were, they can limit your access to the levers that you need to pull to buy and sell. Now, if you're not an exchange, if you're using decentralized finance, or even if it's just between you and I on chain, unless the blockchain itself is degraded, that transaction is not going to stop. It's going to keep happening. It's not going to. No one can. There's not a button someone can press that says stop this. Turn it all off. Let's end it now. Kind of scenario. So it really depends on to what degree those that have built the venue or the technology that you're using, what degree of control they have over it that could potentially inhibit you from performing some action, whether it's buying or selling cryptocurrency on the blockchain. Um, and I think that's one of the most powerful things about the blockchain is that it does provide a degree of sovereignty, of availability, and of transparency that you don't really get in traditional finance. As I think it's a great example of what happened in GME back in
I
2021.
would just love to
Uh,
understand, like, had it been on the blockchain, had you replaced GameStop and all of the madness that happened, what would have been the variable options, and what would have the degree of that output or that input? What could have changed? Like, I would love a case study. I would love for somebody to build a case study around the hypotheticals. Like, I know that we're already through it, we're done with it, but like, there's so many people that are crypto curious or in crypto denial, where it's like they don't understand the benefits, and it's like, well, I would love for a Harvard white paper, I suppose. I have to imagine it eventually happens, where it's like you could showcase, well, what would have happened had it been on chain, where people could have had more available access
oh,
to their funds, rather
well,
than it being in a contained environment that was regulated in a different way.
I would say yes. Great question. I think there are examples in the history of blockchain or cryptocurrencies where you do see just like kind of these really significant drawdowns in value for particularly things like meme coins. Certainly, you see the rise and fall very rapidly, but even some of the larger bellwether variants of this or blue chip ones like Bitcoin or Ethereum, where they can fall precipitously. It can be very rapid, and it can be lengthy as well. And instead of there being circuit breakers that stop all trading or intermediaries that say no, like stop it now, this is too much, it just continues until the market decides that it's reached an endpoint and it needs to stop or needs to rise further. So I think what you see in the blockchain environment is really maybe a more complete version of an efficient market where there is the ability for the market to self-correct versus there being always someone with a finger on the scale or an ability to, move the train tracks around a little bit.
Yeah, and I always think it's interesting when people don't understand, like, what is a coin, what is the utility of the coin, and what is the viability of that particular backing, right? And so I've always looked at it as like almost anybody can start to build an ICO, and instead of it being a traditional IPO where it's going to be on the Nasdaq or in some other variant like that, it's like Next Level could technically build its own coin and then benchmark it against the performance of our recruiting team. Now, would we want to do that? I don't know, probably not. But the world could choose to invest in our coin and invest in the future of Next Level's ability to perform at a rate, and then which you get to experience the benefits or the repercussions of how we perform as our utility in a recruiting function. And I think a lot of people overlook and underestimate what it truly means to have utility in a coin, and like, why does it have value? And it's just like, well, why does Apple have value as a stock? It's because they have products, they perform, it has utility, and people invest in it.
I think you're not wrong. I think maybe that is a good
I'm
good way to.
oversimplifying it. I'm trying to like, how do I explain it to a 5-year-old here? Because that's totally, there are some things that are definitely wrong in that, but a lot of people don't understand that portion either.
No, I think that is the desire for the sort for this would be different from Superstate, which is an actual fund that does generate interest and effectively cash flows. In many cases, a lot of tokens are created not to do something like that. They are more utility. They are there for governance. That is, when, for instance, when you're an Apple shareholder, you're supposed to be able to vote for certain things that the Apple's board or management team puts forward to the shareholders. But for the most part, your vote as an individual shareholder doesn't mean a whole lot. There's like quite a lot of shareholders that are bigger than yourself to really have an effect within blockchain. It's very easy to access a token and then to participate in governance very directly within the communities of these different protocols or projects that have minted tokens. I think there's always a desire to make tokens a bit more useful, maybe even more valuable. I think there's a lot of experiments for things like that on chain. They don't have a complete reflection right now of equities like the Apple stock that is really a reflection of future cash flows. But I think there's a desire to really lay the groundwork for the concept of a token to be able to replicate that of an equity. To maybe even there are companies that instead of issuing their stock on the NASDAQ or NYSE, they issue it on the Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah. And which I'm like, I always get really interested on how that's going to work, where that's going to be, and what does the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years look like. But I want to kind of go back to Superstate a little bit. And obviously y'all are hiring. And one of the things that, a lot of people that particularly listen to this, it's not only to listen to your stories, but also to understand, how do I walk in Reid's shoes one day? And then also, like, what are some of the flaws that you've seen throughout the interview process, whether that happens to be in your current spot, whether that happens to be at Stripe, Chime, or anywhere else that you've worked? What do you imagine are like common mistakes that you've seen people make throughout an interview process?
Great question. I think the first one that has always come to mind is kind of low levels of enthusiasm. If you're not excited about the company or the product or the problem that you're going to be working on, maybe you could fake it, but that's probably going to show through. And at that point, like, why are we talking? If I have to, pull you in kicking and screaming the entire time, it's probably there's some degree of misaligned incentives or interest that we should address. So I think that's the first thing. Like, do you show up? Are you excited? Are you asking a lot of questions? I think for me, that's always shown just a really, really strong interest in the company and the problem in whatever area you're going to be focusing on. I think it's like the thing you have to do. And if you don't do that, it really does kind of dilute the entire process pretty dramatically. I think that's really kind of number one. Outside of that, it's, mistakes can kind of go all kinds of different degrees across the spectrum of, incendiary to just, wasting someone's time, not preparing for a case study or saying some really, vicious or unprofessional things. Definitely seen it all. Just don't do those things.
Sometimes you're like, the simple answer is don't be a jerk, and it
Yes.
still happens. Sometimes the simple answer is do some homework before showing up. Know that the name of my company is Superstate, not State Space.
Yeah.
Know
Yeah.
that, like, know who you're interviewing, know their background, have genuine questions in place, have some curiosity around the product and ask clarifying questions around assumptions. Like, there are all these little things that you can do to set yourself up for success. And there's small things that get overlooked that should be the obvious things at times, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Could not agree more.
So what are some of the things that you see then as the complete opposite, where like these are major green flags, where it's like, hey, take the keys. These are the keys. This is how you get into the kingdom. Just do these things. Listen to the podcast. Say, I spoke to Shane. I told Shane exactly how to get a job. Here's the roadmap. What are those green ticket items?
Oh, I do think initially it is the first of like, being enthusiastic, asking all kinds of questions, showing up, really just putting yourself forward as being someone who really wants to work at the company and be there. Secondly is, of course, having the right, there does need to be kind of a meshing of skill versus need in some regards. Um, but then I would say there's always occasionally an opportunity to surprise. It's always hard to know exactly kind of how that's going to manifest or what that really means. Um, and one example that comes to mind is a this is I think back at Square, was hiring a product manager, and mid interview he realized that a case study he'd prepared for he had made bad assumptions and it kind of just wrecked his entire presentation. He asked us to give him 10 minutes if we would mind and leave him give him the room effectively to rework it and represent and said, okay, I've never seen that happen before. And he did that and it was great. He actually knocked it in the park. It kind of revealed a variety of things kind of that maybe would not have been revealed so quickly. It was like a very high degree of confidence, a lot of honesty. He didn't try to just like muddle through it and just making excuses or things like that. He was willing to ask for what he really needed, or they were at that point in time. And I think one of the more interesting things is like the ability to execute rapidly under pressure. I think was really, really shown through. And you certainly don't get to see that last one until someone's kind of on the job. So that was actually very interesting.
Yeah, it was like he was almost able to show you his superpower, which was like, oh, I messed up. I didn't hit it on the head. I made a mistake. I actually need to change some things. And he gave the vulnerability to go, hey, step one, Reid, I messed up. Pause. I gotta make some changes. I gotta make some tweaks. Let me have some space. Let me have some time. So I'm gonna have the vulnerability to say I messed up. And then I'm gonna have the confidence to say, give me give me 10 minutes. I'm gonna set a timeline for myself in this moment. And then I'm gonna execute and then show delivery, and he was able to roll with the punches. And especially when you're in a startup or in a smaller environment where it's like execution matters and honesty matters, vulnerability matters, self-awareness matters, because somebody, to your point, could have very easily have just gone, made a presentation, we're just going to see if I can end strong on a failure, like whatever. Or they could have just been like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna I'm gonna walk myself through the finish line because I got it's over, but I'm just gonna walk myself through. And there could have been a lot of alternative actions that person took, and instead asked for the space, had the vulnerability and confidence to be able to do what he needed. That's awesome.
No, you're absolutely right. Maybe one or two things that kind of revealed there. I think you used the word superpower. It's spot on. If there's a way for you to show that, I think it's probably the best possible thing for everyone because then the company or those that are interviewing you get to understand whether or not, yeah, this person's great. They have this superpower. This is exactly what we want, and you're able to really showcase what you can really bring. And if those things really kind of lock in together, it's like, well, this is obviously going to work. We just have to, come to terms. Um, I think the last one is I do think, and I think this is also maybe one of the best green flags is candidates or even the interviewer being very candid up front early on. Like, what are the specs of this role? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, what is the company actually like? What is compensation like? Being very candid up front, I think will save kind of everyone a lot of time, and everyone will get kind of on the same page rapidly on like, do we want this to happen?
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. So couple of last things is like, obviously you guys are growing. What is Superstate currently hiring for today?
We're I was about to say we're hiring across the board, which we are not doing. We are hiring engineering. This would be front end and back end. Definitely would very much like more front end engineering talent. It is not always the easiest skill set or role to fill, particularly in crypto for a variety of reasons. Um, but we're also looking to hire for our marketing team right now. We're looking to hire a coordinator who will work with our head of marketing on a variety of go-to-market challenges in front of us.
Okay, so when I look at your front end engineering team, what does that look like, and what are you hoping somebody has in their background?
Right now, we technically have a single front-end engineer. So I think the desire is to have more than one.
Increased
Um,
capacity.
yes, yeah, increase capacity, yeah, if you will. Um, this is going to be someone that ideally can work well at a fast-moving company. Execute very directly, build the front-end interfaces internally and externally that sit on top of the back-end infrastructure, and can not just take necessarily direction, but kind of determine exactly like what are some better ways to go about this interface. Work closely with our designer to do it the same. On like how can we make this better? How can we improve this? How do we make not just the interface work, but how do we make its connective tissue to the back end also maybe a little bit streamlined, faster, better? So I think it's in a company like Superstate, there's not just a pigeonholed role because it is so small, so young. Even though you may be working on this particular type of thing, your blast radius, if you will, your impact, it can be pretty significant because you're probably going to be touching every aspect of the business and company, no matter what.
And from my understanding, on-site, remote, hybrid.
A little bit of hybrid. So we do have our headquarters is in New York. We have an office in New York where there's kind of the critical mass and concentration of the company. But we do have people like myself that are not in New York. So there's roughly 30 or 25% of us that are not based in New York. New York is desirable. It's certainly not the end all be all for amazing talent, but New York is it's a great city, and I think we've convinced some people it might be worth even moving to if they'd like to work at Superstate.
Fair. So goal is somebody in office, if possible, and loves the office environment, which we've seen an uptick over the last year where more and more people want to come into the office, especially in a hybrid environment where we can establish culture, we can establish trust, we can establish some creative modes where you don't have to schedule a meeting to talk about that one little brain part that you had right after you
No.
used the bathroom. Like,
Oh my God. No, no. We are allergic to that. It's, use Slack, get in a huddle. You do not need to schedule a meeting. We do not need to wait for an in-person, on 3 days from now. It's a little more fluid for us, but we want to be able to have a place where everyone can come together if they really want to or need to.
cool. So how can people get a hold of you, Reid? So let's say that they're interested in Superstate, they're interested in applying, they're interested in whatever reason they were interested in you, but they're like jazzed up and they've got the fire, they've got the spark, they're ready to go. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can email me directly, first name at superstate.co. They can also go directly to superstate.co. In our about page, you'll see a link to our lever page that has the open roles, and you can apply directly there. And that's those are the primary ways. Very straightforward.
Perfect. So if you want to learn more about Superstate, if you want to interview, if you're a front end guru that has some knowledge in crypto or at least crypto curious, reach out to Reid. Like he said, follow him on LinkedIn, follow their LinkedIn page at Superstate, go to their website, get a hold of them. Look out for what the future marketing person is going to do to help with all the other things that you get to follow. Join their
That's right.
community. So Reid, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak to me, to speak to everybody in the community, and to share your story and to share everything about Superstate, what you guys are hiring for. I'm really excited to see your future growth, what you guys do, and how you're impacting the state of the Web3, fintech community over the next couple of years. And I know you guys are getting ready to make a really big splash.
We're trying to make it super. So yeah, I hope so.
Super splash. So appreciate it, Reid. Follow, like us, comment below if you've got questions. And again, reach out to Reid, look up Superstate. They're doing awesome things. All right, man. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me, Shane.